Western civilization and wipe it out. At the present juncture, the world of Islam is in a calamitous condition due to hostile invasions coupled with the inner factors affecting the past generations. Poverty, ignorance, academic backwardness, moral laxness, and worse, cultural and at times political domination by its enemies on the one hand, and great problems such as those of Palestine, Afghanistan, Lebanon, Iraq, Kashmir, Bosnia-Herzegovina, the Caucasia, and others, on the other hand, offer a long list of divine and human responsibilities to the governments, political dignitaries, and leaders of the Islamic world. Today, we should take the initiative. So far, the enemy has always held the initiative. And we have, at the best, only made some complaints. In a historical process comprised of dozens of initiatives by the enemy, Palestine has been turned into the personal belonging of the Zionists. First, some Palestinian lands were purchased, then the immigrant Zionists were armed. Afterwards, civil war raged, and Palestine's dismemberment was declared. The new parts of that Islamic Arab country were conquered and occupied. And ultimately it was usurped entirely, while parts of Egypt, Syria, and Jordan were also annexed to it. Up to this point, the Arab neighbors of Palestine have only once held the initiative, and that was the October 1973 attack by Syria and Egypt during the holy month of Ramadan. This attack did not reach full results due to the cooperation of the United States with Israel and the inaction of the Islamic countries. Nonetheless, it was a source of honor for the Arab front and led to the liberation of a part of the Arab lands. From then on, the Zionists and their supporters, headed by the United States, have all along held the initiative in chanting slogans of compromise and generally to consolidate the usurped occupation of Palestine. And they have driven their rivals to all possible extremes. We Muslim governments should have offered more serious assistance to the frontline states to rescue Palestine. In the past, some of our governments' behavior have been disadvantageous to the frontline states. A prominent example was the government of Iran in the Pahlavi era. Pitifully, at that time, Iran was a safe haven for the Zionists and a faithful colleague for the usurping Israeli regime. Dear brothers and sisters, this condition is incompatible with Islamic dignity and far away from the remedies to the pains grieving the Islamic Ummah. All Islamic countries should assume a meritorious role in retrieving the rights of the Palestinian people, and the world of Islam should also proceed from passivity to a state of holding the initiative. Both these duties are at present carried out wholeheartedly, but might and main only by the faithful and dignified youth in Palestine and Lebanon. Hail to them! Brothers and sisters, our opposition to the so-called Middle East peace process is because it is unjust, arrogant, contemptuous, and finally illogical. The imposed principle of peace for land means that the Zionists would return the lands of all neighboring countries, provided that we accept that Palestine belongs to them. What could be more unjust than this? What response can be offered to the ancient Palestinian nation in this losing transaction? Ironically, the Israeli regime considers even this inappropriate and has rejected it. Isn't the time rife for the world of Islam to respond to this spirit of arrogance? If we regulate our ties and make them brotherly, we will have power to do so. What can the United States do vis-à-vis the united front of the Islamic countries, ranging from Indonesia to North Africa? Today, global arrogance gains hope and strength by creating discord and disunity in this front. Is it not time to bolster and strengthen our ranks in this front? Perhaps the existence of an enemy such as Israel in the heart of the Islamic lands could have brought us closer. But the covert hands of arrogance effaced even this peril from along its way. Something has been done to us that at present we fear each other more than we fear the enemy. The temptations, falsehoods, and sly publicity have made the Islamic countries erroneously and unduly intimidated by one another. For 18 years now, the political designers of arrogance are breathing their poisonous breath to make our neighbors in the Persian Gulf fearful of Islamic Iran, which holds the banner of unity and brotherhood. I declare that Islamic Iran poses no threat to any Islamic country whatsoever. Blessed by the Quranic injunctions, Islamic Iran is today more avid than ever for unity, dignity, and might of the world of Islam. Thanks to the Islamic faith, and notwithstanding the enemy's publicity ploys, we Iranians have upheld and preserved our national unity in an unprecedented way and enhanced public involvement in the affairs, contrary to the claims and innate wishes of our enemies. The brilliant presidential elections this year was an example of this daily increasing public presence. The government is united in uniform and all officials are sympathetic to one another. Confidence and self-reliance are the major decisive factors in all our academic, political, economic, and cultural endeavors. Possessing of this belief in ourselves, which Imam Khomeini taught us, we have been able to reconstruct and rehabilitate a ruined and backward country left from the Pahlavi era and made even more devastated during the 8-year war imposed on us. We witnessed the same endeavor in some other brotherly countries as well. But political dignity and power are of greatest importance. Our nation and government have eradicated the influence and intervention of foreigners in their country by recourse to Islam. Nowadays, the Islamic Ummah is avid for that self-confidence and for this dignity and independence. And all of us should master our efforts to this end. It is a historical responsibility. Today the ground is paved for the fulfillment of this duty and for the regaining of dignity, power, and full independence for the world of Islam. If coordination of these efforts require help, we now have it at our disposal. The organization of the Islamic Conference. We should glance at this organization and its future prospects. Today, 27 years have passed since the fire broke out in Masjid al-Aqsa, an event which resulted in the setting up of the OIC. But the world's present conditions expose the organization of the Islamic Conference to more serious expectations as compared with those of the past. This organization can be the symbol of true unity of the Muslim countries in the face of events and their common interests. It can speak on behalf of its members, make demands, carry out requisite measures, and enjoy their financial, economic, and political backing. It can serve as a troubleshooting liaison among its members whenever measures and activities for an enormous task and a common objective require coordination. The organization can act as the coordinator. Where needed, it can engage in arbitration, and when beneficial, it can offer advice and consultations. At present, though the world of Islam has a share of less than 20% of the global trade, which is the approximate ratio of Muslims compared to the overall world population, very insignificant percentage of this amount is devoted to trade among the Islamic states. The organization can play an active role in this effective economic area, which will have impacts on politics of these countries as well. Currently, some of our countries enjoy a precious natural and productive facilities, as well as academic, industrial, and cultural capacities and capabilities, while some other countries are in dire need of these. The organization can seriously intervene in fostering a logical and just exchange of such facilities. Today, large groups of Muslims are inflicted by heart-aching pains that entail immediate solutions. For instance, at present, some Afghan states, such as Bamiyan, are exposed to public starvation and terribly cold winter conditions. The people of Iraq are facing some most difficult problems in their history due to scarcity of foodstuff and medicine. And lives of millions of human beings, especially children, are being threatened. In Algeria, the most gruesome crimes are perpetrated by covert hands to accuse the Islamists and to defile Islam. In Bosnia, Kashmir, Somalia, Karabakh, and some other regions, the Muslims are beset with their own problems. The organization of the Islamic Conference can set up special committees to see to these issues and solve the tangles with an effective measure in which all members may participate. To activate the organization and issues related to the member states, we need no one and nothing except public will and financial donations of the rich Islamic countries. The possible opposition of governments that stand to lose from Muslim unity will not be able to create any barriers along the way if our resolve is firm. When the Muslim people of the Balkans were barbarically subjected to genocide, and when the Bosnian nation was standing alone and defending its Islamic identity in the face of the organized military invasion of some countries and the indifference of others, the need for such a center was felt to allay a part of the sufferings of those brothers and sisters and to significantly tilt the balance of global equations in favor of that oppressed nation. Right now, the presence of foreign warships, and more importantly, the United States military muscle flexing in the Persian Gulf, which is an Islamic sea and an important source of energy for the entire world, is a big cause of insecurity. A powerful organization of Islamic conference can, on the one hand, use the medium of Islamic power and dignity to force the aliens to stop this intervention, and on the other hand, eliminate the pretext for this improper presence in the region. The organization can, when needed, employ forces from the Islamic countries to preserve and safeguard peace and security in this area. At present, Muslim minorities are intensely in pain in some countries due to discrimination, oppression, and discriminatory treatments. It is incumbent on all Muslims to aid and assist them. But in order to offer serious and acceptable assistance within the framework of international relations, we are in need of an Islamic Inter-Nation Center. And which center can be more adequate than the Organization of Islamic Conference? There are scores of incomplete and half-done enterprises, each of which is the duty of all Islamic countries, governments. I am only mentioning some examples. In all these instances, no single Islamic government can fill the vacuum for an Islamic governmental center. Brothers and sisters and dear guests, let us benefit from the opportunities with the succor of the Almighty and gain greater proximity to one another. Let us strengthen and cement the center that binds us together. The Organization of the Islamic Conference should be able to follow up its resolutions until full implementation so that such meetings would be fruitful for our nations. The organization should, moreover, be able to establish the Inter-Parliamentary Union of the Islamic countries and translate the idea of the common Islamic market from a far-fetched dream to a reality. It should lay the foundations for an Islamic arbitration tribunal. And finally, as the representative of some 55 Islamic countries and 1 billion and several hundred million people, the Organization of the Islamic Conference should become a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council and be the 6th member with veto right, so long as this right exists. This was an outline of the future prospects of the Organization of the Islamic Conference, and this can depict the future prospects of the Islamic Ummah. And peace be upon you, and the mercy and blessings of God.
Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, welcoming delegates from more than 50 Islamic countries to this Islamic summit, pleading with them to unite, to strengthen their organizations so that they can face the challenges that all Islamic nations are facing. In his words, Ayatollah Khamenei says Iran poses no threat to any Islamic country whatsoever. He also made some statements about Mideast peace process, one of the issues high on the agenda, and he called it unjust, arrogant, tempestuous, and illogical. For some more analysis, I want to bring in CNN's Christian Amanpour, who is in Tehran covering that conference. Christian, what is your impression? Any surprising overtures here from Ayatollah Khamenei?
Well, not really. It was predictably a tough speech. Ayatollah Khamenei, as Iran's spiritual leader, has always represented the extreme conservative faction in Iran, and it was predictable that the opening statement would have strong words against Israel, against the United States, against the Middle East peace process. It wasn't against the United States per se, but against the United States in its support of Israel in the Middle East peace process, which, as you said, he called arrogant, unjust, and illogical. He also said that the Muslim countries should unite and get rid of what he called the aliens. He meant the United States military presence in the Persian Gulf. He said this presence, this heavy military buildup in the Persian Gulf, was a threat to the region. He called the Persian Gulf an Islamic Sea with an outlet for very important resources for the rest of the world. But most of the speech was devoted to calling for unity amongst the Islamic nations, for solidarity. He called for the OIC, this conference itself, to go forward with avenues to redress problems amongst the Muslim world. He said that Muslims are separated into those who have great national resources and those who are very poor, and he said it was up to Muslims to be able to redress that balance and help their poorer neighbors. He also said that despite his denouncement of what he called cultural, political, and military invasion against Islamic nations throughout the years, that much or part of that blame could be laid not just at the invaders, as he termed them, but at the Muslims themselves, for not being strong enough, united enough, not having enough solidarity to fend off those kinds of, as he called them, cultural and military invasions. And now what we're having as we proceed with this is the official and formal handover by the Moroccans, who are currently chairman of the organization of the Islamic Conference, to the Iranians, who will hold the chairmanship of this organization for the next 3 years, Bettina.
And Christian, as I mentioned before, he's reassuring his neighbors, the other Islamic countries, that there will be no threat from Iran. What has happened that Iran has succeeded in now taking over the chairmanship of this conference? How has Iran changed in the last few years?
Well, importantly, he said that Iran, as you say, would be no threat, and he emphasized this, to fellow Muslims, fellow Islamic nations. He said this in response to urgings from other nations, and he mentioned again the United States and Israel, to Islamic countries in the Persian Gulf area not to be friends with Iran and to isolate Iran. He reiterated that Iran posed no threat, and perhaps this meeting gives the most demonstrable proof of that, or at least a gradual reacceptance by these Gulf states of Iran back into the fold, because as you know, since the revolution, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, the Emirates, Egypt, Jordan, all sorts of countries in this region have been very afraid, if you like, have had their political differences, have shunned Iran, and have been reluctant to accept Iran, because Iran has constantly been talking about exporting its Islamic revolution, its militant brand, certainly in the early days, in the early years, and this was very discomforting to most of these countries. But many of them have sent their top officials here. One of the most important guests is the Saudi Arabian Crown Prince, who's coming here, the highest-ranking Saudi to visit Iran in the last 18 years since the revolution. The foreign minister of Egypt is here, again the highest-ranking Egyptian. The Crown Prince of Jordan is here, again the highest-ranking Jordanian. Also the Vice President of Iraq is here, the first such level of representation in Iran since Iran and Iraq fought those bitter 8-year war between each other. So while Iran has not been able to get all of the heads of state, for instance, Hosni Mubarak of Egypt here, King Hassan of Morocco is not here, King Hussein of Jordan is not here, it has managed to get high-level representation with feelers, if you like, from all these countries on the possibility of restoring full ties. But things are still not all cozy between Iran and its neighbors. It's a process that is underway, that is beginning. It's a process that the new president, Khatami, has repeated over and over again he wants to see happen, to make better neighbors between Iran and its neighboring countries in this region, and for a better understanding within the Islamic world. And as Khatami has extended this proposal to then making a better understanding between Iran and the rest of the international community. Now, it remains to be seen just how much power President Khatami has in terms of foreign policy, but his tone, at least, is conciliatory.
I'm Mark Brzezinski, your host for this weekly program, Mideast Realities, and thank you for watching. If you too are concerned about the situation in today's Middle East and about U.S. policies toward that crucial region of the world, and if you'd like to meet like-minded persons, why don't you come to one of our weekly social meetings? I'll be there, of course. Just give us a call for details.